Hi everyone, and welcome to HFA's Young Adult Google Hangout series. My name is Lauren Nybert, and I'm the Associate Director of Programs for HFA. Tonight's Hangout is Planning for the Future Financial Success. We're really excited to have you all here tonight. This is a part of a series at HFA for young adults exclusively, and we've have a hangout about once every other month, and the topics have ranged thus far from dating and relationships to coping with the pain to advocating for yourself at school and at work. We really encourage you to get involved with our hangouts in the future, and at the end of the broadcast I'll be talking a little bit about our next hangout that we'll be having in June. But tonight we're here for our financial success hangout, and some things that we're going to be talking about tonight are about tips for creating a budget, learning how to live within your means, how to use credit cards responsibly, and then also because insurance is such a large financial burden for the bleeding disorders community, we'll be spending some time too to talk about specific insurance issues, navigating through some insurance terminology that can often be a little bit confusing, and then about how to choose a health insurance plan that's both affordable for you and effective in meeting your needs. So just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is a special edition of our Young Adult Hangout series, as we have a special Ask the Experts panel. So we have two panelists tonight, Mark Borowski and Katie Verb, and they'll both introduce themselves in a little bit. Mark will be talking about the financial side of things, and Katie will be sharing a little bit about our insurance issues that we're going to talk about in the portion of the hangout. So, but just a few housekeeping pieces before we get into the hangout. We really encourage you to participate, and this hangout is meant to be interactive, so please type in questions in the question box that you have here, the side panel you can click on to type a question. If I'll likely leave questions towards the end, but feel free to type in your question anytime, especially if it's more of a clarifying question. I'll certainly stop the presentation so that you can get your question answered, so please feel free to put that in at any time. And then also just a friendly reminder that what we talk about here tonight is not to be taken as direct advice. Please speak to your personal financial advisor or insurance advocate that you have for these specific or personal situations that you have for yourself. So with that, I'd like us to get into the hangout. I first want to just have you get to know Mark and Katie a little bit more. So, Katie, go ahead and start us out here.
Hi, my name is Katie Verb, and I am the Associate Director of Advocacy and Government Relations at HFA. So I do a lot of our legislative stuff and our any policy work, and then deal a lot with insurance issues. So I'm excited to be talking about some of the things to consider when picking an insurance plan, and some of the issues that have come up with the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA as I'll call it, and give you some information about that.
And Mark?
Yes, okay. My name is Mark Borowski, and I work as a financial representative here in Wisconsin. So I work with couples, professionals, small business owners to help them attain financial balance and put plans together and manage their finances. I also have a connection with HFA. I've been a part of the Dads in Action program on and off for several years, I think back since 2008. So I've done some talks at the symposium, probably 2 or 3 different years. I've also traveled around to the member organizations and done talks there and presentations, and I really enjoy working with the dads, and it's kind of nice tonight to be connecting with the young adults in HFA and serving them in this capacity. So I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you both for being here tonight. Really excited about this hangout. So the first portion of our hangout, we're going to be talking about specific financial issues, and then we'll get into Katie's portion with insurance. So, Mark, just kind of want to start out, kick off the hangout. You know, we hear it a lot that Americans specifically live, you know, they have a hard time living within their means, and it can be really daunting to, once you're in that sort of habit, to go to learn how to live within your means or within a budget. So how do we kind of start to change that mindset?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, you're right about that, Lauren, and it's a challenge. I mean, if you think of the society we live in today, it's an immediate gratification society. You know, we want things immediately, whether it's a high-paying job or whether it's a information or a text from someone. I mean, from information standpoint and just material things in our society, you know, it's immediate gratification. And if you think about it as well, I don't want to get too political, but we have a government that's $18 trillion in debt. So, you know, our big example in our country is not a very good one. And there are also rapid technology advances. And because of these technology advances, you know, there's new things coming out all the time. And, you know, we want to keep up with the Joneses and what our friends have and all that kind of stuff. So for a lot of reasons, it really is a challenge. I'll just share with you a couple of statistics to give you a sense of kind of the state of Americans and just where we are with our finances. About 3 out of 10 Americans, so 30%, have less than $1,000 in savings. Over half, 56%, have less than $25,000 in savings. The average college graduate graduates with over $23,000 in debt. And overall, all college graduates have $1 trillion if you add it all up. Over half the people, 55%, spend more than their annual income. So they're just simply spending more than they make. Thus, that's how you rack up debt and create debt. And about 1 out of 3 adults say they have no money at all saved for retirement. So, and again, these statistics are pretty much from the last 3-4 years. Most of them are government research that's been done. So I don't like to throw out statistics without some kind of backing of where it's coming from. So they're all really from like 2010, 2011, and more recently.
Okay.
So, you know, how to change that mindset. For starters, you know, I think anybody on the Google Hangout tonight is doing the right thing, just about learning about money management. I mean, anytime you can learn about money management in some capacity, taking a class, reading articles, doing things like this, that's only going to help you. I'll give you an example. I think I've kind of started late in life as far as learning about finances, which I guess somewhat regret. I wish I would have got an early start, like probably most people. But one of the things I've decided to do with my kids, and I've changed things. I have two kids, a 16-year-old and a 10-year-old. Is any money they ever earn, whether it's from babysitting or a job, or even money they get as gifts, like at birthdays or holidays, we only allow them to spend 70% of that money. You know, and usually you don't go run out and spend it right away, but we take 30% and we put it aside. And we split that 30% up into 3 areas. 10% goes to charity, 10% goes to their personal education fund, and 10% goes to savings for whatever it might be. And they know now, just after doing this for a couple of years, my daughter, my 16-year-old, just mentioned to me the other day she earned, I think, I don't know, quite a bit of money on babysitting. And she said, "Oh, Dad, I have this money." She said, "We have to do the 70-30 thing." So just trying to help people get that habit of saving money on a consistent basis. And when you get the money, it's not all yours, because when they get jobs, it's going to be going to taxes and things like that. But also just to develop that habit of saving. So anytime you can start to do that at a young age, I think that's beneficial. And I'll tell you, in my experience, while it's kind of challenging or maybe a little difficult to not go buy the latest and greatest thing all the time, or have what your friends have, if it's the latest iPhone or whatever it might be, it does feel really good to make good decisions about your finances. I mean, I've had that happen in my life where it's like, you know what, boy, it would be nice to have that, but I really made a good decision, and now I have either more money in the bank or I have less of a credit card bill at the end of the month or whatever. So don't knock it until you try it. When you start to make those decisions, you do feel good about that, and it also makes you feel like you're a little bit more in control of your own destiny and your own life, which you are then if you're making good decisions. Um, Another way to really change that mindset is always start with what you earn. I mean, whatever you're earning, whether it's your job or side jobs or whatever it might be, that's what you have to spend. So just to try to break that whole mindset of, well, I'll just go get it because I want it. Well, do I have the money for it? The other thing that I think helps change the mindset is anything you want to purchase. If you think about what it would take to earn the money to purchase that. So let's say you're working a job making $10 or $15 an hour, and you want to get that $40 pair of jeans. Well, that's going to, after taxes, that's probably 4 hours of work just to buy that pair of jeans. Is it worth it to you?
Right.
Well, maybe it is, and that's fine. And then buy it and feel good about the decision. If it's not, you know what? Maybe for that one night you're going to go out, you're going to borrow a pair of jeans from your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. I don't know. But I think once people start to realize what it takes to earn the money to buy things, then I think it helps get a little bit more discipline in your spending habits. Because really everything in life is trade. You're trading your time for money, and money for material things, and money for vacations. And so if you think of life as trade, what is it that you have to trade to get what you want, and is it worth then that trade? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that 70-30 rule that you have. I think that's really easy to think about too. That's great. I wish that I was taught that from an early age.
I wish I was too. Yeah, like I said, I got started way late in life, and it might be something different for someone else. It doesn't have to be 70-30, but the idea is pick something that makes sense. And part of that's just based on we wanted our kids to have a certain amount of their money that they're going to use for charity. And things then come up, like throughout the year I'll have friends of mine that'll send me something in an email on fundraisers or whatever. And or we'll sponsor a family or at Christmas, for the Christmas gifts. And sure, most of it's going to be dad's money, but you know what? It's going to be maybe $5 or $8 for my 10-year-old and 15 or 20 for my 16-year-old, and they're going to contribute to that. And now they've got that money already. It's already put aside. So that's that's kind of
that's great. And because especially like you often get bombarded with especially on the holidays with charities, and you think, well, I don't have the money to do that. But if you've kind of planned for that, you potentially could. And also I think it's great to teach your kids too about giving back, and for all of us too. I mean, you never know when we could be in a situation where you would need need help like that. So
sure. And I imagine people that are in the Hangout tonight, growing up, you probably had a lot of fundraisers, for either teams you were on or your schools or whatever, and we were probably the ones that always kind of had our hand out asking for fundraising, but it's nice to already have money set aside, so when people ask you, well, yeah, that's right, I should reciprocate. And then it also, if the money's set aside already, it almost feels like you're giving less because it's set aside, and that's just what it's for, rather than, that's coming out of my spending money. No, it's not. It's coming out of your charity money,
Right. So how do you so that kind of helps with changing our mindset. But in terms of physically getting started creating a budget, I think some people get a little bit scared. How to even start that? Are there tools available for creating a budget? Talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, conceptually first, any budget, again, you want to start with what you earn, what you have to start with, which is the money that you're bringing in or that you have. And then as far as costs go, it's good to separate them into things like fixed costs that are going to be the same or very close to being the same every month, and then your variable costs or discretionary, costs. So in fixed costs, there'll be things like, your rent, or if you have a house, your mortgage, your utilities are pretty consistent as far as what they cost. Groceries, I would say, is a fixed cost, although obviously you can change that a little bit. I do like to think about groceries kind of combined with dining out, because then it's something that you can certainly manage. And then variable costs are your entertainment, your clothing, your dining out, your vacation fund, all that stuff is more variable. So if you start with what you earn, you've got to cover your fixed costs, obviously, otherwise you're digging a hole right to start with. And then it's a matter of what I have left to kind of assign to those different categories of, clothing, entertainment, eating out, vacations, things like that. And then it's partly a matter of just kind of thinking about, well, um, what's more important in my life? Is buying clothes or entertainment and going out? And then you might allot certain amount of money based on those kinds of things. As far as budgeting tools, I would just really recommend people to search online. There's several tools out there. Some of the ones that I found, well, first of all, even before you search online, software, Quicken software. I don't know if people are familiar with Quicken, Quicken. It's used to really manage your checkbook, electronically. You can also make payments through that way, but it has a budgeting feature, so that's a real effective way to just budget your money. And since if you also keep your checkbook that way on Quicken, it has all categories of different expenses. So it really gets detailed on, categorizing things, and real helpful that way. So that's more of a software. Certainly people keep spreadsheets on Excel too. You can do something like that. But then a place like mint.com, mint.com, it has budgeting that it'll provide for you. Budget Simple's another website. I mean, DaveRamsey.com, he's a financial guru out there. That's another place to go. Kiplinger, who's a financial services firm, they have budgeting tools. Now, for each one of those, you're most likely going to have to create an account, so you're going to give up your name and an email. I don't know about address necessarily, but your email. So, they're going to want to put you on an email list, which that's sort of the trade, I guess. Again, back to the trade concept. That's the trade for using their budgeting software. So there's tools like that you can use. A couple other basics, things that I've done in the past. This gets a little bit into credit card use, which we'll talk about later. But I've really gone a couple of different ways. For credit cards, when I wanted to just use it to kind of charge everything, one nice thing about doing that, which I don't necessarily recommend, is it does categorize your expenses and send you that information. So like at the end of the year, it'll send you pie chart information. You know exactly where, what percentage of money you spent where, which that can be helpful then for analyzing, where you're spending money. I've also even done, instead of charging things, when I wanted to get a better handle on my expenses, which might be where a fair amount of the people on the call tonight would be, is I've actually used just cash. I've taken cash out at the beginning of the month and put it in different envelopes where it was like, this is my dining out fund, this was my clothing fund, and I'd go to it and pay cash then, and then when I ran out, as much as possible, I tried to not spend any more money on that. So that's another way to kind of manage your finances and do that, which is an effective way, because it does help you realize, okay, at the end of the month I'm starting to run out. Or like the clothing fund, heck, I might go 2 or 3 months without spending all that money, and then 1 month I go out and spend a lot on clothes, but it's there then, So any other, I guess, questions about kind of the budgeting? Those are some ideas.
Yeah, no, those are great tips. And we'll get into the credit cards in a minute, but you mentioned some statistics when you first were sharing about the mindset and about savings, how I forget the exact amount you said, but how very few people have a lot of savings. And we hear a lot. I know, whenever I would watch like Susie Orman, she would talk so much about an emergency fund, building that, how many people, when the economy kind of tanked, they lost their jobs, if they didn't have an emergency fund, it was very difficult to meet their what they had to spend money on each month, their budget. So how do you build an emergency fund, especially when you don't have a lot of income left over each month? How do you, how do you even begin to think about that?
Sure. Well, back to the basics of just deciding how much do you want. I mean, let me just step back. Kind of the 70-30 example I gave. So whatever percentage you're going to save. Oh, sorry about that.
It's all right.
Anyway, I'm getting distracted now by these sounds here. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can't hear that. So, every month you want to be saving a certain amount of your paycheck, okay? And then you can just allot a certain percentage to an emergency fund. Now, when I work with clients, the rule of thumb that we have, our approach, is that people should be saving at least 15% of their income. That's their gross income. Now, that usually, people's eyes usually get a little wide when they hear that, because most people aren't saving anywhere near that. And now, it doesn't mean it's all going into a checking account, that's earning no interest. It can be in various different places. It can be a retirement savings. It could be your kid's college education. It could be savings. It could be in investments in mutual funds, that kind of stuff. So it can be in different areas. So emergency fund, the basic rule out there is having about 6 months of income in savings. And again, our rule is even a year's worth of income, household income. Now it doesn't. You're not going to get there right away. It takes a long time to get there. But the only way you get there is one step at a time. And even if you're putting a small percentage away, even if it's maybe 2% of what you earn a month or whatever, you're building that. You're building that. And it is for just what it says, emergencies. I mean, for instance, a couple months ago, I had to replace my furnace. It was $3,500. I mean, that's not gonna be an expense every year, but every 10 or 20 years, So it's for those types of things, or sometimes auto maintenance, or that's just kind of material stuff. Job loss. I mean, people have job losses. You don't know how long that's going to last, or other life events like having kids or getting divorced, things like that. Now, hopefully, again, the crowd tonight is not thinking too much about those things, but maybe. So I don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah, and I guess do you have any suggestions of, where to maybe put that so you're not tempted to dip into it when you want to do things that are not maybe in the category of like an emergency.
Sure. Yeah, actually, you can set up a separate account just for that. And then I don't know if you can have it just taken right from your paycheck and go into that account. So you can do like an automatic withdrawal or deposit, I guess, into that account. And I recommend it a lot with my clients, just because, like you said, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And if they want to access it, a lot of those, it's a money market account really is what it is. And there's still some check writing capability from that, or you can still get that money, but it's just not quite as easily accessible as your savings or checking account. And it's nice to have that coming right off the check, because then you're not even thinking about it. And then what you're doing is you're just learning to live off of what you do get as a check. You know what I mean? From your job, rather than, I have to now go deposit that. No, just have it taken off your check in a separate money market account, and creates the discipline of saving, and it builds over time.
Right, that's a great tip. So, in thinking about now going to credit cards, which we touched on just for a bit, but so credit cards, especially for young adults, can be great at establishing credit, especially when you're trying to, rent an apartment, having that credit established, but they can be really dangerous. So, what are some suggestions for using them responsibly, but also before then, selecting a credit card, because there's so many out there. So what's advice and sort of figure?
Sure. No, good question. And first of all, realize that if you want to build good credit, that means you pay your bills on time. That's what builds good credit. Not that you rack up a lot of debt. I can put a lot of big balance on a credit card. No, it's that I can charge something and I pay it off on time. Or I rented an apartment and I pay my rent every month. So that's where you get credit, because people are more likely then to loan you money if they know they're going to get paid back. I mean, that's pretty basic, but just so people realize that's what good credit is. I'm a reliable person that I could get a loan. So some things to think about as far as credit cards. Certainly you want something with a low interest rate. Especially if you do plan to carry a balance, which I wouldn't recommend, but if you're not sure, or if you're in a certain time of your life where you might have a balance, you want it lowest rate as possible. Ideally, it's also one without any annual fees. Now, some credit cards, if they provide certain amount of awards or like airline miles, I know I've had a credit card that would have a $90 or $100 fee a month. but to sign up, they give you like 50,000 miles, which is essentially 2 round-trip tickets. So for something like that, that might be worth it to me, but maybe not to someone else. So trying to stay away from annual fees if you can. You might be interested in something that has some type of reward program. Most credit cards do these days. I've had anything from things that provided cash back, so they would just take it off my bill at the end of the month. That's probably the best one, just because it's sheer money. I've also had ones that paid me either hotel points or airline miles. Those are good too, because then when you plan for travel, it's kind of nice to then stay in a free hotel or use the airline miles. I would just caution that I wouldn't want to. Don't feel then compelled that I've got to go take a vacation just to use my airline miles. You know what I mean? Because then it sort of is feeding into other bad decisions. Of taking a vacation that maybe you can't afford. Let me just see a couple of my other notes on the credit cards. You may want something that has a generous credit limit. Again, maybe, but you don't want to just rack up debt too much then either. The other thing you want to look at is fees. So some credit cards, not only are you going to get paid interest, or they'll charge you interest for missing a payment, but it'll also charge a late fee, like $25 or $35. So you want to watch out for that. Hopefully there's no fees or no transfer fees, like if you transfer one balance from one credit card to another credit card. Trying to stay away from those transfer fees. And just so you know, in my lifetime I've argued plenty of a late fee and got them to, withdraw it. So even if it happens, I'm a couple of days later, whatever, call them up, give them your sob story, and see if you can get away without paying a late fee.
Right.
The other thing to think about is how they compute average daily balance, which then ties into your interest rate. Normally, average daily balance is figured out by the amount of money that you have in balance divided by the number of days in a month. And that'll end up being a lower amount than if they use 2 billing cycles. So if the credit card uses 2 billing cycles to figure this out, it's going to end up being higher fees. So that's another thing to keep in mind as far as trying, and it's kind of fine print stuff as far as trying to pick credit cards.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, how do you figuring out the percentage rate I think is pretty simple, but something like that. I know that I think, what was it, a couple of years ago, that they made those credit card statements a lot more easier to read. I think they were mandated, is that correct, by law to do that? But how do you figure out some of those details, just reading through that booklet they give you? Or
yeah, it's information they'll give you, and you know what, if you're on the phone with, some people are probably doing this online, but if you have questions, call the number and have them explain it to you. If the person online can't explain it to you, then I guess you question whether you want to give them their business. But I have no problem asking questions and thoroughly understanding, and so if this happens, what is that, what am I charged, that kind of stuff. The other thing that and maybe this is getting into using the credit card responsibly, it's just best, provided you have the cash flow and the savings, which again you quote unquote should have, at least in theory, is to set up for automatic payments too. So that your credit card will automatically be paid at the end of the month. Now again, depending on the situation where you have to maybe carry some debt because of an emergency or whatever it might be, you can easily stop that, hopefully in time, before you realize the credit cards do. But that's just another way to kind of force you to, or try to force you to live within your means if you're paying it off every month and you just set up the auto payment, and then you'll never get hit with a late fee either. The only possible issue is if you don't have enough money in your checking account, then you won't be able to make the payment, so then you would get charged either interest or a late fee.
Right.
And life is so busy, it's so easy to miss one payment. It really is these days. So I set all mine up for auto payments, and if there's ever a time where I can't have that happen, I'll just have them stop that payment that month, or I'll go online and do it. It's pretty easy to do that. Right.
So what about credit scores? There's lots of commercials for knowing your credit scores. Why is it important to know what your credit score is?
Yeah, it's it's kind of a nice to know. I mean, unless you're planning on um, making a large purchase and needing a
Mhm.
large loan,
Mhm.
like a car or a house, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but that's really when it matters is what your credit score is.
Mhm.
Because then you may get a lower interest rate if your credit score is higher. So a higher credit score is better. I mean, usually it's like between 350 and 850. Higher credit score means you have very good credit, you pay your bills on time, you're a low risk. So um, financial institutions will lend you money at a lower interest rate if you have a higher credit score. So I guess that's the number one reason why it's important. But what I was saying initially was, unless you're planning on making a large purchase where you need a big loan, like a house or a car or something like that, I'm not saying it's not important and don't do things to have bad credit, but
Mhm.
it's kind of a nice to know thing then in those kinds of situations. Um, yeah. So the other thing is, I mean, just briefly on how it's calculated. I'm not going to get in a lot of detail on that, but it does look at uh, previous credit performance. So about 35% of your score is based on previous credit performance. About 30% of it is on your current indebtedness. So again, past history, and then okay, situation you're in currently, and then about 15% of it is on the time that the credit's been in use. So how long has this credit been in use that you are already making payments on? 15% on the types of credit available, and then just a small percentage, 5% on pursuit of new credit, like how much are you pursuing getting new credit. So again, it's nice to know because it could mean a lower interest rate for you, but it really comes into play when you're trying to make a big purchase. So if for some reason you have a lower credit score or lower than you'd like, then it's a matter of consistently paying bills over a length of time to get that score back up. And help yourself out that way. Anything can be recovered from. It's kind of like when you get a speeding ticket, then you have to go 3 years and it drops off your record. So similar
Right.
kind of idea. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So thus far, we've talked a lot about things you can do maybe a little bit more proactively. But what happens if it's too late and you already have a lot of debt, whether that be credit card debt or student loan debt, whatever, maybe lots of different types of debt. Um, what are some suggestions of, kind of beginning to chip away at that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's two basic schools of thought on that. You know, most people say pay off the highest interest rate item first because that's the one that's going to cost you the most over time. Um, or at least put however much money you're putting towards paying off your debt. You might have three different types of debt. Maybe put the largest amount of money towards that one. I've heard another school of thought that says, well, it's nice to pay off the lowest balance item first because then it'll pay off quicker and you'll feel like you're making progress and you're seeing debt go away. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's another school of thought. I mean, I guess I look at it more financially that it is best to pay off something that's um, going to cost you the most.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, though, and I think this is important, this kind of ties into the type of planning I do with clients. Um, just in working with clients, I've seen that it usually means something more emotional to them. I mean, certainly it's a financial thing, but a lot of people just are like just bothered by the debt and they just want to get it paid off and they're just sick of having it, and that's understandable and that's good that that's a motivator. The one thing I would not recommend people doing though is paying off debt before they learn the discipline of saving. So let's say somebody has no savings and
Mm-hmm.
has debt. Personally, in my work, I don't recommend that they just pay the debt off. I
Oh,
recommend that they start saving money and also pay their debt off. And that might seem, silly in a low interest rate environment, but if you think about it, if you don't save any money, you just work at paying this debt off, and if something else comes along that creates more debt, well, you know, you're kind of back to square one. And you also then haven't learned that discipline of saving, you know. So
right.
it's important to learn to save even while you're paying off debt, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, the other thing is obviously you could consolidate debt, and
Mm-hmm.
then just have it all be one payment. I haven't personally experienced that a lot or gotten into that. I'd be somewhat cautious on the debt consolidation. I can't recommend good places to go to for that, to be honest with you. But that is another way to do it. If you have a lot of debt, is to just have someone consolidate the debt and then you're making one payment. That's a whole nother
Right.
topic. But
Yeah.
other questions on that area? I don't know if I answered your question well enough there.
No, you did. That's interesting about, you know, even if you have a lot of debt to also, really focus on saving. I think, too, when you're trying to pay these like really high portions, especially if it's a credit card, and you're maybe trying to pay above the minimum balance, which, is good, or the minimum payment rather. But then you end up at the end of the month being short because you've been paying on all this debt and you maybe can't pay your current expenses that you have, or you don't have anything saved. I think that's a good way to think about it, is making that space to save, while also paying off what you need to with your debt. But
Yeah, and the idea there is, shouldn't you get in line in front of your creditors?
right.
Shouldn't you pay yourself first and
Hmm.
then pay off your debt? And that's just that whole mindset of, I have to pay myself first. I have to, I have to save even though I have this debt. The other thing too that I didn't mention that I'd forgotten about, but there might be certain debts that you can either postpone paying,
Hmm.
or just get on a payment plan. Like, I mean, medical bills, I don't think you can get on a payment plan for that without some kind of interest rate that a credit card's charge. So medical bills, or maybe even student loans, you can put that off before paying them. That's another strategy, I guess, when you're managing multiple types of debt that I forgot to mention earlier.
Okay, great. And just a final question before we get into some of the insurance specific questions with Katie. So retirement, even though those of us that are on the call tonight, of the young adult community, I mean, we might not be thinking about retirement yet. That seems really far away, especially if you're just starting a job. But what are some suggestions for getting retirement savings started?
Sure. Well, again, hopefully it just comes from um, simply having good savings habits to begin with. Because if you have good savings habits, then retirement is just one of those areas that you're going to save for. Most people start it when they have a job and their job has a retirement account, like a 401k, or for nonprofits, it's a 403b. So that's a plan where they can start to contribute money into that, which is a good thing to do. The one thing that I see a lot in clients I work with, though, that's an issue is people over rely on these retirement accounts where that's all they're doing. They're just putting a lot of money in a 401k. And, for somebody, people on the call tonight or on the Google chat tonight in their 20s or 30s, it's good to put some into that. But if you think about it, you're putting money away, which is good for retirement, but you're not going to touch that money, or shouldn't touch it anyway, for 30 or 40 years. That's a long time to do without that money. So again, back to the liquid savings and developing, again, we work with clients, our philosophy is to have liquid assets and have liquid
Mhm.
savings. So I guess I'd say don't save for retirement too much where you're then going to, need that money. I mean, if you're putting all your money in retirement and you're not building that emergency fund, that's not good.
Right,
So
and you can take it out, but you'll get dinged pretty badly, right?
yes, you'll get a penalty charge of 10%, plus you'll pay taxes on the money. Because typical 401k, the benefit of a 401k is it's tax deferred and it grows
Hmm.
tax deferred. Well, the downside is you're eventually going to pay taxes on that
Right.
money, and it's decades down the road, and you don't know whether taxes will be higher or lower then. And then if
Hmm.
you do need to access it before 59 and a half, or before you've had it in there for 5 years, then then you're going to pay a penalty. And there's people that. In fact, back to statistics, I just read an article a couple weeks ago in Money Magazine where they said that 28%, so almost 3 out of 10 people, have a loan against their own 401k,
Wow.
and 42%, so more than 4 out of 10, have cashed it out when they've changed jobs.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting about this article is the whole article is about how to get to a 7-figure retirement and 7-figure 401k. But then in this article, they had these stats about how, well, 3 out of 10 have taken a loan and 4 out of 10 have cashed it out. Well, if 401k and saving for it is so great for retirement, then why have 7 out of 10 people needed that money? It's because they haven't developed a liquid assets that they need
Right.
for things like emergencies or other reasons. So again, to put money away that's 30, 40 years down the road, I guess don't put too much in it. What I would say, you know, without trying to give too much advice, maybe go up to what the match is, because the company will match
Mm-hmm.
often, not always, but like say if you put in a certain percentage of your salary, they'll match it up to a certain percentage. Well, that's nice because they're matching the money, so maybe put up to that, but don't go beyond that right away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or at least initially, when you first start on a job, you might not even be able to put up to that amount. So start small, and you can always change it.
Right. Great. Well, thank you, Mark. We will, there's a lot of good tips and suggestions. I know personally I learned a lot. Let's switch it over to Katie, so we can start talking a bit about insurance. Hey, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Okay, so the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as we often hear in the media, it does provide some protections to young adults, specifically, and those with chronic conditions. So can you just share a few things that it has protected this particular age group, with living with chronic condition as well?
Sure. I think the first thing, the two biggest things are that no denial of insurance based on pre-existing conditions. Obviously, bleeding disorders are genetic disorders, and that was huge. Also, there's guaranteed issue with the ACA, so you're guaranteed a health insurance plan. Another really big thing, I think, for the entire population, and I think it applies to young adults as well, because a lot of parents have gone through a lot of these issues, but young adults will not have to, is the no annual or lifetime caps. So we used to see a lot of people having to quit their jobs or, switch plans all the time. So not having that, I think, is a really huge plus side. And then again, for young adults, the coverage on your parents' plan up until age 26 is pretty key. And then I think the other really big thing is the ability to purchase affordable insurance on the marketplace. It gives you more freedom in jobs you can choose. And if you want to work for somebody that doesn't have a health plan, or if you want to start a small business, or if you want to do something different, the ability to have an affordable plan on the marketplace is, I think, pretty key for young adults as well.
Great. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot more sort of options now too.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some basic laws that employers have to abide by, for employers that provide health insurance have to abide by?
Well, again, under the Affordable Care Act, the biggest thing is that, if an employer has at least 50 full-time employees, that they have to provide insurance. But one of the things under that is that the coverage that they provide cannot cost their employee more than 9.5% of their family income. So, if you're having to pay out a lot, or if you've got insurance that's not that great provided by employer, that's actually against the Affordable Care Act, and they will actually have to pay a fee if they provide insurance that doesn't cover you. And then good insurance under the Affordable Care Act from an employer has to cover at least 60% of your costs. So one of the things that has happened is that there has been a lot, this cost sharing happens a lot with insurance. So you might have a plan that might cover 90% or 80% of your costs, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But if you work for a company that provides insurance, they have to cover at the bare minimum at least 60% of your costs. And from there, that can't be more than 9.5% of the income of your household. So that's something to look out for if you've got an insurance plan that you think you're paying out a lot on, and is a financial burden for you.
Okay, great. And so for those on the call tonight whose employer maybe doesn't provide insurance, or maybe they're consulting, or they don't have an employer to provide that insurance, what are some of their options that they have?
Well, the best option right now is the exchange in your state. It's affordable care. It's a lot of the plans there provide a lot of great coverage for people with bleeding disorders, and personally, I'm on the exchange. I think it's a great place for young adults to receive health care, and to get insurance that they need. So absolutely go to the exchange.
And can you just mention like really quickly about, open enrollment, kind of when that is? I know it just closed, and was it February? How that works a little bit.
So open enrollment is I think it's from like November until February. It ended at February 15th this year, and next year it'll be about the same dates. There are special enrollment periods, though, that you can go if you lose a job, if you get married, if you have a baby. There are life-changing events that you can especially apply for insurance. So the open enrollment period is usually in the fall through early winter through February. But if something happens, a big life-changing event, you can always apply for a special enrollment period.
Okay. And I think some people are confused, like, can you still go to an insurer like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Humana, whatever? Can you still go directly to one of those websites and sign up for insurance, or does it always have to be through the marketplace?
You can. You can still buy individual plans through their websites. The exchange is good because it allows you to compare different plans, and that's why I would recommend using the exchange as opposed to going to those individual plans. While the plan would be the same, a lot of people with bleeding disorders, I would never recommend them to buy anything less than a gold or platinum plan. The bronze and silver plans are really good for people that do not have chronic illnesses. The premiums are lower. But for people with bleeding disorders, you're going to need that extra coverage. So, you're going to have to look at your out-of-pocket maximums. You're going to have to know if your hematologist and your HTC is in network. You're going to have to know if your factor's covered. And you're going to have to look at your deductible, and you're going to have to look at coinsurance. And the great thing about the exchange is that when you log on to your state's website, you can pull up, some of them have, it's a different option, but you can pull up a bunch of different plans, and you can look at the financial outlay of those plans right there. So you can say, okay, well, this plan's premium is $200 a month, but the deductible is $2,000, and it's a 40% coinsurance. This plan's $222 a month, and that's why I would say, to the extent that you can really compare the plans, that getting them on the exchange is better than just going to the individual websites.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you. So, when you're on the marketplace or wherever, examining all these plans, health insurance terminology can be very confusing, especially if you're a young adult and you're used to your parent doing it and now you're on your own, you're starting to do it yourself. So can you just share with us a little bit about some common terms that we'd likely see and some basic definitions to those?
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen here for a minute, and hopefully everyone can see that. These are the most common terms. Lauren, can you see that?
I can't now, but let me just do one thing. No, I do not see it actually.
Oh, how about that?
There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So these are really common insurance definitions. So your premium is the monthly amount that you'll pay for your health insurance. So depending on what kind of plan you choose, it can be anywhere between $200 and $300 depending. The deductible is the amount that you must pay out of pocket before a health plan kind of kicks in. That's what they call it. But it may not apply to all services. So that's something, when you're looking at your deductibles, that's something that you really want to pay attention to. And I can talk about that in a minute. Copay is a fixed dollar amount that you will pay for a service and or prescription drugs. So if you want to go see a doctor, there might be depending on the plan you choose, there might be a $30 copay. It's a fixed dollar amount regardless. And then coinsurance is a fixed percentage of what you would have to pay for a service or a prescription drug. So those are some common terms that are used a lot. And one of the things that I wanted to mention about coinsurance is that, I'm sorry. One of the things I wanted to mention about deductibles and coinsurance is that it's really important to look at what goes into your deductible. One of the most important things about deductibles is that they do not cover things that are out of network. So when you're looking at an insurance plan, you need to see if you go to an HTC, is your HTC in the network of your insurance plan? If it's not in network, then that will not go towards count towards your out-of-pocket maximum. And the out-of-pocket maximums for 2015 under the Affordable Care Act are $6,600 for individuals and $13,200 for families. So, if you choose a plan and it works out that your HTC is not in network, and sometimes I've actually seen where the hematologist that is at that HTC is not in network. The HTC itself is in network, but the hematologist is not. So you really have to look at what's in network. Is the doctor you want to see a part of that network? Is the HTC you want to go to a part of that network? Is the drug that you want to take a part of that? Because it can really increase your financial outlay if you choose a plan that does not cover your medication, your doctor, and the entity you want to go to get service.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful. And how would you recommend finding out some of those things? Is it important to call the insurance company and ask directly if things are in network, your particular factor that you're taking, or your hematologist or whatever?
Well, so a lot of, under the Affordable Care Act, there's supposed to be a lot more transparency in healthcare bills. They're supposed to tell you what's covered and what's not. That is still being worked out, I have to say. It is there. CMS has the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services that governs the Affordable Care Act and the plans under the ACA. They have issued some rules about transparency, but I've heard a lot of different plans not having all of that information readily available. However, I do think that's going to change. I think that the best thing to do is to call and ask. If you can't find it online, it doesn't mean it's not covered. It just means that they have not put that information up there yet, or they are not. I mean, there are a lot. These are very big organizations and big entities, and they are being required to comply with a very big federal law, but they are given leeway in some portions of that law they don't have to comply with until 2016 or 2015 or so my best advice would be to just pick up the phone and call, and it can be painful sometimes to sit on the phone with your insurance company and wait, but I think that's the best way to really find out. And don't rely on what you find on the internet. They are required to post drug lists, but through a glitch in the law, sometimes they just post a list of drugs. It's not necessarily every drug they cover. So I would call and find out if what you need is covered.
Okay, great. Now, you shared a lot already about specific things to look out for when selecting an insurance plan, but anything else specifically for those with bleeding disorders, any other important components you recommend or suggest?
So I would look at the out-of-pocket costs. I think that's the biggest issue. A typical employer HMO or health maintenance organization. So if you work for a big company that has a plan, they'll cover about 93% of your out-of-pocket costs. A platinum plan on the marketplace will cover about 90%. A typical employer PPO will cover about 90%. A PPO is a preferred provider organization. So I would make sure you look at those plans and make sure you know what you have. And then a gold marketplace plan will cover about 80% of your costs. So if you have a bleeding disorder and you infuse factor prophylactically, what that means is that you can be expected to pay up to between 7 and 20% of those costs of treating the bleeding disorder. So that's something to really keep in mind. Look at the percentage of what the plan will cover. Medicare for young adults isn't applicable, but a silver marketplace plan will only cover 70% of your costs. So it might be cheaper on the front end. You might look at a silver plan and say, gosh, well, a $220 premium per month is better. People with bleeding disorders obviously need constant care. They need HTCs. If you have an issue, you're going to be required to pay up to 30% of those costs. So I think it's just really important to think about that when you're picking plans. Looking to see who's in network. making sure that again, your HTC, your hematologist, and your factor is all in network as opposed to out of network. And then creating a budget. Mark talked a lot about creating a budget. Create a healthcare budget. How much can you afford to spend on healthcare this year? And just making sure that those things. Do you need optical care this year? Are you going to have dental costs? Or do you think you're going to go need to see a physical therapist? Just keeping in mind all of that stuff. There are some plans that have really high deductibles, but you're allowed to have what's called a health savings account with that, where you put money aside into a health savings account that's tax deductible. So do you want to look into something like that? Are you going to be needing any procedures or surgery this year? Just thinking about those costs and just really planning for your year, and read your plan really carefully. If you work for an employer, contact your HR department, contact your insurance. If you have a marketplace plan, they have phone numbers to call, and healthcare.gov is a great place to look for stuff. What are your pharmacy benefits to make sure that factor's covered is another big thing. And are you going to need any medical equipment this year? And also, I would say know the rules of your healthcare plan. Are you going to need prior authorization? Are you going to need? Is there a limit to the number of times that you can go see a doctor? Those are things that you really need to look at.
Great, thank you. Now, are there any, going through all of these, getting insurance on your own for the first time especially can be kind of daunting. Are there any helpful tools or resources that you would recommend for figuring out this process?
Well, there are a lot of resources on our website, hemophiliafed.org, and then healthcare.gov has all the information that you'll need for looking at plans in the exchange. A lot of states have helplines that you can call. For example, I was just in Michigan giving a talk, and there is a Michigan-only healthcare line. If you're confused about healthcare, it's a nonprofit organization that's set up a helpline. So I would just look on the internet if something like that is available in your state. And all of this is very complicated. A lot of it's very new. So a lot of states have set up helplines and things like that, and have set up tools. So I would just do a little bit of research about where you can find that specific information and based on where you live.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And just too, as you were talking about factor specifically, there's a lot of manufacturers have programs, copay programs, patient assistance programs if you're maybe experiencing a lapse in coverage. So on HFA's website, hemophiliafed.org, we have a list of patient assistance programs too for you to learn more about and navigate as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then the other thing I would say is Patient Services Inc. PSI provides premium assistance, especially for young adults who need some help. So if you are finding that you need to be on the exchange, or that you've got really high premiums and you need some help, I would suggest checking out PSI as well.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much. So for both you and Mark, just a couple of questions, and then we'll just wrap up here. Let's see. Mark, specifically for you, is there such a thing as having, if you have a lot of credit cards and you're paying them on time, you're trying to pay off your balance, is there such a thing as having too many credit cards? Does that affect your credit to have too many open?
I believe it does. Now, credit is not necessarily one of my key areas of expertise, but let me just take a quick look at my notes. I thought there was something about number of items. Hang on one second here, please.
No problem.
Well, I think if you have debt on the cards, then yeah, because it's going to count your current indebtedness. I don't know just about sheer number though. I guess I'm not exactly sure. Unless there are balances on many of those, then yeah, then that's an issue. But I would say, is there such a thing as having too many? Well, if you're using them all, yeah, I think I think there probably is because I guess I would just wonder why there are so many because you should be able to consolidate to a few key ones unless you're trying to use a lot of department store ones. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure how they're asking that. Um, so I don't know if that totally answered the question, but if they're carrying debt on many of them, then yes, it will affect your score. But just from the number, I don't know that that alone will affect it.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions that we have here. But I thank you both for being on the call tonight and giving us your expertise. Just a final mention, our next Google Hangout for young adults will be on June 2nd, and it's at the same time, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, and the topic will be Curing the Wanderlust, Traveling Safely with a Bleeding Disorder. So we'll have a panel of young adults that will be sharing their experiences of traveling outside of the U.S., so traveling abroad, and tips for staying safe, getting treatment if they had needed it, how they managed all of that while still being able to explore and see other parts of the world. So check that out. Katie mentioned some great resources, healthcare.gov, keep an eye on hemophiliafed.org, our website. Follow us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. We're always posting really important insurance information, other happenings that are going on, whether it be for young adults or other programs. So please keep an eye out for that. And thank you both again, Mark and Katie, for sharing your expertise with us tonight. And I wish everyone a lovely evening.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye.